Okay, this video will contain spoilers from Chapter 5 of Honkai Impact Part 2. I don't normally talk about content released only in China, but I see so many people confused about why Sparkle is in the main story of Honkai Impact that I feel like I need to make this video as soon as possible to clear out misinformation and hopefully stop it from spreading too much. Especially regarding this image, which a lot of people seem to think is from the upcoming collab. It's not. This is from the main story, but I'll be explaining everything you need to know about Sparkle in Honkai Impact 3rd and all the Honkai Star Rail references in a bit. So, if you don't want to be spoiled, bookmark this video and come back after you've played Chapter 5, which is set to be released on October 17th on the global server. At the same time, as most of you know, I still have some health issues that I'm dealing with, so the editing for this video won't be as good as usual. This is not the level of quality I want my content to have, but until I'm fully recovered, I must make some compromises to make sure that I can deliver content. I feel like it's still better than posting nothing, right? Anyway, allow me to explain everything you need to know about the Honkai Impact 3rd and Honkai Star Rail collab, why Sparkle is in Honkai Impact 3rd, and what this means for the greater story of the Honkai universe. So, what is happening? At the end of the Chinese 8th anniversary livestream for Honkai Impact 3rd, the developers announced a collab between Honkai Impact 3rd and Honkai Star Rail. They also released a short teaser and announced that they will come out with a behind-the-scenes video on September 19th. So, naturally, the first question that people had in their mind was, is this just a one-way collab? And the answer to that is, we don't know, but probably. The developers also mentioned that there will be some news from Star Rail's side as well, but we don't really know what this means. It could very well mean that Star Rail will also get something, or that they will also announce the collab, which they already did on their social media. Judging by previous collabs, I'd tend to say that the collab will only happen in Honkai Impact 3rd, but people are hopeful that Honkai Star Rail might get something as well, especially since the two games swap logos at the end of the teaser, which doesn't mean much since the game that usually gets the collab is always the first one, and even after the swap, Honkai Impact 3rd is still the first. It just adopted Honkai Star Rail's style of logo. But we'll see. Also, some of you might not know, but this is not the first collab between two Honkai games. GGZ, also known as Honkai Gakuen 2, and Honkai Impact 3rd had many collabs in the past, with Honkai Impact 3rd never getting anything out of them. When Honkai Impact 3rd collabed with Genshin also got nothing. So Hoyo always seems to follow this weird formula where the smaller game always gets the collab and the bigger one gets nothing. I do not know if they are afraid because people might not be familiar with the smaller game, but if the main point of the collab is to promote Honkai Impact 3rd to the Honkai Star Rail players, I feel like HSR not getting anything is a bad move. Seeing that the only thing we have confirmed for the collab is Sparkle as a playable character, the only people I can see coming over to Honkai Impact 3rd are the people from r/Sparkle mains. On the other hand, if they were to introduce a Honkai Impact character to Honkai Star Rail, and maybe, I don't know, let's say for a moment that they put Finality Kiana in Star Rail, and somebody likes her playstyle and design, there are a lot more chances for that person to try out Honkai Impact 3rd after than if the game gets nothing. I want to make something clear. The only thing we know about the collab, as of now, is that Sparkle will become a playable character in Honkai Impact 3rd. That's it. The entire 10 minutes behind the scenes was just an announcement of that, which explored various collab ideas that the devs had, but they will most likely not be used in the collab itself. But given that it's Sparkle, I don't expect it to be anything serious or quote-unquote canon. I'm expecting something along the lines of the weird dream she put us in Penacony. My personal theory is that, as we can see in the teaser, Sparkle goes back in time and kills Shaoji before he submits the script for the final lesson, so the collab will happen in a version of Honkai Impact 3rd where Himeko never died and the story went a different direction. Also, the devs said that the collab will show us a version of Honkai Impact 3 that happens outside of the confinements of the solar system, which isn't just Star Rail. Or maybe they meant that we'll see the characters from Honkai Impact 3 on different planets across the universe. Wait a minute, isn't this just Star... Like I said, I don't expect the story of the collab to be canon, simply because the masked fools are involved and the ideas for the collab were not canon. They even went out of their way to say that it would be problematic if it was to be canon. And I repeat, we know nothing about the collab except that it involves Sparkle. I expect something along the lines of the Teresa event we got in 7.6 or the Kira event in 6.7. For example, the Teresa event was just a dream the real Teresa had. The event itself was not real or part of the main story, but the fact that Teresa dreamt about those events is real and even referenced in the main story later. Same with Kira, her event in 6.7 was just a vision of a possible future she got in a bubble world, but the events did not happen in the main story. So I'm expecting this collab to be integrated somehow in the main story. It could be a dream or something else that will not be a real event in the story, but will still happen inside a dream or vision or something else related to the main story. And you may ask, but Homu, why would the collab have anything to do with the main story? Well, that's because Sparkle is canonically on Mars right now and is part of the main story of Honkai Impact 3. I know that everybody is super excited about the Honkai X Honkai collab, but you know what collab is even more exciting? That's right, the collab between GamerSupps and Homu Labs. What is GamerSupps, you ask? Well, for those of you who do not know, GamerSupps is an energy formula designed to be the perfect everyday energy and health supplement to aid in whatever life throws your way. Through the use of organic caffeine, 5 vitamins and minerals, nootropics and antioxidants, GamerSupps can help you function at a higher level for a longer time to enhance your body and mind to peak performance. Like when you have to sit through hours upon hours of story, which the Honkai games are pretty known for. I'll be honest with you, I was a bit skeptical at first, but GamerSupps sent me a package to try before I partner up with them, and I must say I was pleasantly surprised by the results and managed to cut my coffee consumption to more than half since I started drinking GamerSupps. Not only does it taste good, but it also gave me plenty of energy to get through any task I had for the day. You can choose between flavors like Anime Girl Tights, or if you're feeling truly risky, you can try Brand Risk, which is just peach flavor. Also, if you don't like caffeine, don't worry, because GamerSupps also has caffeine-free options. So, what are you waiting for? Get yourself some GamerSupps and use code HOMU at checkout for a 10% discount accessing my link in the description. I saw a lot of people spreading this image of Sparkle and Vita around, thinking that it's part of the collab, but it's not. This image is from Chapter 5 of Honkai Impact 3 Part 2. Same with this image in which we can see Kiana talking with a Memokeeper. So, what's going on? Why is Sparkle in the main story of Honkai Impact 3 if this has nothing to do with the collab? Well, she's just there, making her the second character after Welt who appeared in both games. And to make myself perfectly clear, this is not a character variant. This is not a different version of Sparkle. This is the same Sparkle as the one in Star Rail. During the story, in typical Sparkle fashion, we see her disguised as Teresa, Dreamseeker, and Songche while talking with Vita. Fun fact, Songche and Sparkle share the same CN voice actress, so she's basically doing both roles. The reason why Sparkle came to Mars was to get Vita a mask and essentially invite her to join the Masked Fools, which she accepts. Their interaction ends with Vita putting on the mask and saying something similar to "It's time for the fools." This is somehow in line with what we know about Vita. Not only is her personality very similar to what you'd expect from a masked fool, but now that she's a follower of Aha, just like the other masked fools, she has the ability to leave the solar system and travel to other worlds, which is something that someone who desires absolute freedom like Vita would want. On the other hand, the story is not over and both Sparkle and Vita are up to something on Mars, which will probably happen in the next chapter. This is not just a one and done thing. Sparkle is still on Mars and she will continue to appear in future chapters. But this raises another question. How did Sparkle enter Mars? As you know, Mars is a quantum computer that can be accessed through a specific terminal. The Dreamseeker terminal, which Hylia and Coralie brought back to the moon, is one of them. Tesla and Prometheus also constructed one so they could access the system from Earth. Besides these two, there must be more terminals that we don't know much about, right? And I assume that Sparkle must have used one of them. But still, I'm very intrigued by who let her in or told her about Mars, or was it Vita herself? Since she's a system operator, I bet she could do it. But yeah, if you thought that Vita by herself wasn't enough headache for the cast, now Sparkle is here as well and they both teamed up. What a scary duo, man. Besides Sparkle, this chapter has other references to Star Rail's lore that I'm going to explain now. First, in the beginning of the chapter, Vita is talking about some beings that are the embodiments of concepts and wonders how the children of the sun would react if that grand being were to throw a glimpse across time and space at them. Now, it's clear that those who are the embodiments of concepts are the Aeons. When she says children of the sun, she's talking about the people from the Honkai Impact third solar system. Her dialogue implies that one of the Aeons might throw a glance at our world at some point, maybe setting up the plot for the ending of part 2 or maybe even a part 3. She talks about a being that could throw glances across space and time, and since time is involved, I wonder if she's talking about Terminus or maybe some other Aeon. I also want to make it clear that there are more Aeons than the ones we know from Star Rail. It is stated that there are more than 100, so the idea of having some Aeons introduced exclusively in Honkai Impact 3rd isn't too far-fetched. At the end of the chapter, we have another interesting dialogue between Kiana and a Memokeeper from the Garden of Recollection. For those of you who do not know, the Garden of Recollection is a faction in Star Rail who worship fully the remembrance and go around the universe collecting memories for preservation. Memokeepers don't have a physical form, and as we can see in Penacony, they can very easily enter dreams. It's the same with Kiana. At this point, she is still dreaming, but a Memokeeper enters her dream and asks for her memories to be preserved. Now, this is where things get a little bit weird, because from what we know, the Memokeepers don't steal memories, they kinda just make a copy of them and preserve them. But the dialogue here implies that Kiana will lose her memories if she were to give them away. So maybe this is a Memo Snatcher, which you can think of as the bad cousins of the Memokeepers who, like the name suggests, take memories away. But then again, if that was the case, why would she ask? Anyway, let's assume for now that they are a Memokeeper. The Memokeeper compares Kiana's presence to that of an Emanator. And please don't start any power scaling wars in the comments. I said it before and I'll repeat it again. For me, power scaling in Hoyo games is a waste of time because they are not consistent. The Memokeeper only says that Kiana gives off the same feeling as an Emanator, which makes sense because Kiana is the avatar of the Cocoon of Finality, directly receiving power from it, just like how an Emanator receives power from their Aeon. The Memokeeper also wonders if this world remained hidden from the Aeons, slightly implying that the reason why we don't see Aeons here is that because our solar system was protected by the Cocoon of Finality. We know that the Cocoon has been around for more than 1 billion years, which makes it older than all Aeons. The oldest Aeon, Klipot the Preservation, is in the best case scenario half the Cocoon's age. In fact, Vita herself should be older than a lot of Aeons. So, in case you didn't know, Honkai Impact 3rd and Honkai Star Rail share a universe. And this is a big contention point in the community that caused a lot of arguments between players of both games and misinformation to be spread around. While Honkai Impact 3rd is pretty much self-contained to a single world, Honkai Star Rail explores the entire universe by telling its story through multiple worlds. This is also why Honkai Impact 3rd seems much more limited in scale, because, well, it is. But things might change in the not so distant future. First, if you want to know how the games are connected and why piecing together the cosmology is very difficult, at least if you're playing the game in English, I made several videos in the past that explain all the questions you might have about how the Honkai universe works. I will link them in the description, or you can click the box in the upper right corner of the video to get there. You have to understand that Honkai Star Rail is an expansion of Honkai Impact 3rd. The game was born after the developers sat down at the desk and asked themselves, how can we expand all the lore and world building that we've created through all these years in Honkai Impact 3rd? And that's how Honkai Star Rail was born. What's beyond Earth? What's beyond our solar system? Well, there are these godly beings called Aeons who pretty much have the fate of the entire universe in the palm of their hand. Imaginary palm, of course, because they don't really have a physical form. Well, some do, but you get the point. Star Rail is just the devs imagining what's beyond the world of Honkai Impact 3rd. And even way before Honkai Star Rail was announced, we've got small hints at what they were planning through various media. In the second key manga, Su meets a higher being that is supposedly above the Honkai itself. Many theorize that it might have been an Aeon. We are introduced to the Sky People in APHO, which are interstellar predators that can travel between worlds. And in the Alien Space manga, we literally see Wealth and Void archives leave Earth and tease a grand new journey through the universe that would later become Star Rail. And now, it's time for Honkai Impact 3rd to also catch up with the rest of the universe. I want to make something clear. This is not Hoyo forcing Honkai Impact 3rd lore onto Star Rail players. It's also not Hoyo forcing Star Rail lore onto Honkai Impact 3rd players. Well, actually it kinda is, but I'll talk about that in a bit. The idea is that we've solved the issues on Earth at the end of part 1, and right now in part 2 we're pretty much expanding to the rest of the solar system. So, I think that it's normal for Hoyo to slowly introduce things that are beyond our world to the game, because after we explore our solar system, what's next? That's right, it's other worlds. Just like Star Rail, it's time to face a new obstacle on a larger scale, which involves Aeons, factions and pets. Because we know from Star Rail that this is what lies beyond. Like I said earlier, I will not be surprised if Honkai Impact 3rd will introduce its own set of Aeons at some point. So, this is not some evil plot by MiHoYo to mess with Star Rail players. This is the natural expansion of Honkai Impact 3rd beyond its world. I repeat, the two games share a universe, so overlap is inevitable. I always dislike when I see how much hate Honkai Impact 3rd gets from Honkai Star Rail fans when Hoyo is referencing something in their game from Honkai Impact 3rd. And I get it, some Honkai Impact 3rd fans are obnoxious. I'm fully aware, in fact sometimes even I roll my eyes when I see what some people say online. And I get it, as a HSR only player, it makes you feel like you're missing out on something. It's like when you're with your friends and they all laugh and you are the only one who is not in on the joke. It's an unpleasant feeling. But at the same time, Hoyo stated multiple times that you don't need to play Honkai Impact 3rd to understand Star Rail's story. And that has always been true. Even Penacony's story, which has a lot of Honkai Impact 3rd references, can stand on its own. You don't need to understand Honkai Impact 3rd to get what's happening in the story. But the devs also said that they are building these two games together to expand and tell the overarching story of the Honkai universe as a whole. So, while you can enjoy Star Rail on its own, it's clear that they want you to play both games and they will reward you for it. And that's a fact that people need to come to terms with, especially if you are into the cosmology of the universe. And again, I repeat, the story of Star Rail will always be standalone. You don't need Honkai Impact 3rd to understand it, but they are building the same cosmology together, so they are inevitably connected on a macro level. At the end of the day, they are both called Honkai, and if you don't like it, well, tough for you, I guess. You've probably noticed that all this time I've said that you don't need to play Honkai Impact 3rd to understand Honkai Star Rail, and that it's true as far as I can tell. There is no point in HSR when I feel like you must know anything from Honkai Impact 3rd. But what about the other way around? And this is where I saw some very deserved criticism of what's happening in Chapter 5 from the Honkai Impact 3rd community. Unlike Star Rail, Honkai Impact 3rd assumes that you have played Honkai Star Rail, leaving Honkai Impact 3rd only players very confused about Sparkle, Aeons and every HSR reference in the chapter. And it's not a nod to Star Rail like it was in Penacony. The scene with Sparkle and Vita makes absolutely no sense if you don't know about Sparkle and the Mask Fools. If you are a Honkai Impact 3rd only player, good luck understanding what's happening, because you won't. Similarly, the discussion between Kiana and the Memokeeper also assumes that you know about Aeons, the Garden of Recollection, pets, factions, and so on. So if there is a side here that should be angry, it's the Honkai Impact 3rd players, not the Honkai Star Rail ones. And I also share a little bit of worry because, yeah, the Star Rail stuff feels very shoehorned in. Don't get me wrong, I am very happy to see that the story of Honkai Impact 3rd is finally expanding and that we start to get a much clearer picture of the Honkai universe as a whole, but it does feel like the events of Chapter 5 were shoehorned in to promote the upcoming HSR collab in a way. And again, I'm not against having Aeons or Sparkle in the Honkai Impact 3rd story, but everything felt like it came at a bad time. The story of Part 2 just started taking off. We're finally starting to learn about what's happening on Mars. But now they suddenly throw in Aeons and Sparkle, like, let Part 2 develop a bit before you do that. I'm starting to be very invested in the story, but now that I know that an Aeon could appear at any time, it makes the stakes of Part 2 a bit lower for me. But all in all, Sparkle is here, and I am very excited to see where they are going with this. Oh, and before I end, no, Sparkle being here doesn't mess with the timeline. We know that Masked Fools can travel between worlds. So her being here and in Penacony during the HSR main story is possible. The story right now takes place in 2024, and we know from the Alien Space manga that Welt and VA arrive on the Express sometimes after 2029. We also know that Welt was on the Express for at least 3 years, which could put the events on Penacony in 2032 at the earliest, which is still 8 years after the current events in Honkai Impact 3rd. That's plenty of time to get from Mars to Penacony for her.